Welcome everybody. It falls on me to make the introduction, totally unprepared. But I'm very glad that we've got this session today from the project that Natasha, Daniel, and the team has run. So to give a bit of context, it's what we call a Better Ocean project. It has been funded by the philanthropic donors of the Ocean Institute. At the time, we had made the decision of rather funding a series of small projects, we would fund a single big project to have higher impact and higher outreach. And I think that project has delivered absolutely fantastically on that. So it's been a very successful story for the Ocean Institute and something that we have actually, advertised and marketed around to our philanthropic donors back, but also to our stakeholders. It's really a fantastic demonstration of multidisciplinary work coming together, engaging communities, and having a real impact, in our communities. So I'm very pleased to see it for the first time. Unfortunately, I missed the first two public engagement, in Perth and in Albany. I was traveling for both of the time, so I'm very glad to be here today and to see it. And so, Natasha, it's all yours now.
Thank you very much. It did sound rather prepared, actually. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming along today. Really, it's such a thrill to be here. So my name's Natasha Pauli. I'm an Associate Professor in Environmental Geography in the School of Agriculture and Environment, and I'm presenting today with my wonderful colleague, Mr. Daniel Jan Martin, who's a lecturer in the School of Design. So it's great to see you here, Kate, as well. Thank you for coming. And this has been a really great project to work in this interdisciplinary way. We've also had a number of colleagues coming along from the School of Earth and Oceans, I believe it's called now, so Arnold as well, which has been a really great interdisciplinary project. We're really grateful for the funding from the Better Oceans program. It's really allowed us to do such a fun project and I think quite an impactful project, and we've really enjoyed being part of it. So we're really grateful. As you'll see from what we're going to present, it's an idea that's probably a little bit out there. And so having this funding available to do these innovative approaches is really important. Dan and I are going to tic-tac across this presentation. So I'm going to start by providing a bit of background to the community engagement that we did. I'm then going to move over to Dan, who's going to talk through the design work that was done. And then at the end, so this is what these three little icons are, I'm going to talk a little bit about the feedback that we've received to date on the project. We have had some really fantastic support from local governments, the City of Cockburn, City of Fremantle, City of Albany, and thanks to Carmen Elric Barr, who's one of our many team members you can see up there, we were actually successful in having this project listed as a UN Oceans Decade project. So that's been a really great outcome as well. And of course, before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting here today on Whadjuk Noongar country and pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledging that the Whadjuk Noongar people remain the spiritual and cultural custodians of their lands and waters. The project was undertaken on Whadjuk Noongar Budja and also on Menang country in Kinjarling in Albany. So we're really grateful to have been able to do that, and we're particularly grateful to Sandra Harben, Whadjuk Baladong Elder, who works regularly with the UWA School of Design, and also Meninga Barduk Elder Auntie Lynette Knapp, who works regularly with the UWA Albany campus, for their input into this project, particularly for sharing their time with our students. So I probably don't need to tell most of you in the room what the kind of context behind this kind of work is. Suffice to say, our coastal areas are changing quite rapidly, and we do have a number of issues that are quite prominent in the media. These are all from news media articles around coastline erosion, around inundation, around changes to the places that we really love. These particular examples were from just earlier this year. There was a large storm event in May that caused erosion at a couple of different hotspots, particularly some of the ones that we were looking at in this project. So on the right here, this is Emu Point. Let me see if this works okay. Emu Point over here in Albany. You can see that there have already been some erosion mitigation works put in place, such as some groins that have been placed there. There was also sand nourishment provided to the beaches, and during that event, most of it went back out to sea again. It might come back, I'm not sure. I'm not a coastal engineer. Any questions about coastal engineering, please ask Arnold. And also we've seen similar things around Catherine Point, CY O'Connor Beach up in Cockburn, which has got some ongoing erosion problems as well. And these are things that the community sees. The beach is closed, they can't access it. But what do we do about it? So it's very difficult to come up with different ways of addressing these problems, aside from looking at things that we've already done, like building more seawalls, building more rock groins, which may just delay this process even further into the future. It doesn't sort of fundamentally transform what we're doing. This has been in the news as well. Those of you who've been involved with the Coastal Hazard Reduction, Mitigation and Action Plan, I think I got that right, in the City of Stirling, or who know about it, will be aware that when the draft plan was put forward to the community, there was widespread outcry about the plan to put 17 rock groins potentially along the coast between Scarborough and Mullaloo, and that plan has now been scrapped due to the community not wanting that. People came up with these images, manipulated images showing what it might look like, and there was a coordinated concerted campaign by the community to not have that happen. But these problems still exist. There needs to be some solutions put forward as to what we can do. This is from the Coastal Adaptation Plan from the City of Fremantle, looking at the levels of inundation, another hazard that we are facing along our coasts for the Fremantle region moving forward to 2070. The Esplanade is a particular area, and Fisherman's Harbour. Oh, gosh, I'm pointing at that door. That's not helpful. That will be one of the areas to look at, and Daniel will talk a bit more about that in his section. So the challenge that we really wanted to look at was it's really difficult to imagine what possible other alternatives could there be to try and envisage this transformative change along our coastline that is going to respond to the environmental changes that we know are going to occur, but it's also going to retain ecological values, social values and cultural values that are really important for those coastlines. It's a difficult conversation, including for community members. It can often generate negative emotions, as we saw that really played out with the City of Stirling that I just mentioned. There can always be a temptation to revert to some known solutions. And so in order to get around these problems, we need a really interdisciplinary approach, which is why we were looking at the social sciences, the engineering, coastal engineering, as well as design through landscape architecture to come up with an idea of what could we possibly do differently. So our research question was really around, if we take a more creative approach to community engagement, can that help us envision a more resilient and hopeful future? And it's cut off, but it says in coastal adaptation planning. So we're supposed to be trying to find different solutions for coastal adaptation planning. Okay, so we looked at two coastal change hotspots, so the Cockburn Coast in Perth and the Middleton Bay region in Albany. So that's the region from Binnalup across to Emu Point. Both areas are known to be experiencing rapid change. The first thing that we did was we looked at local values, and to do this, I do a lot of work in the social sciences, and quite often we might do an interview or a questionnaire, maybe a focus group, and get information from the community that way. We wanted to try something a bit more creative, so we actually based all of our social science data collection around doing art workshops. So we did various different kinds of art workshops, we interviewed people afterwards, and our students were also really privileged to have a yarning session with elders talking about those coastal values too. That's the first part of the talk I will discuss. We also had our engineering team looking at understanding some of the coastal risks and providing information about nature-based solutions. I'm not going to talk very much about that today. It's not my area of expertise, so I really couldn't talk too much to that. It was quite an interdisciplinary project. We combined all of that information and gave design briefs to students in landscape architecture across their studio units, where they are given a wide range of experiences with developing design plans for current areas or important areas. And they were given the information from the community and were also inspired by the conversations that they had with our elders. The students and the staff involved, there are a lot of staff involved, then worked together to design these creative visions for the future through the studio work. Dan will discuss that. And we also published and exhibited the approach and designs through a book and a fold-out. Again, that's Dan's part of the talk. Finally, we solicited some stakeholder feedback during the exhibitions that we ran, which I'll briefly overview at the end. So some quick facts about our project. We did 4 different kinds of art methods. We were interested to know some of the nuances around using different kinds of art methodologies. We used poetry, paper collage, textiles and photography. We have run 8 workshops. They were co-led by a local artist, the idea being that somebody who has expertise in that art form can convey skills to people who want to learn. We pitched them at total beginners. So some of the artworks that you'll see were made by people who haven't done any art since high school, and some were done by artists. It was a real range. We had over 70 creative works submitted, which we then exhibited. We have had, I think it's probably around 60 landscape architecture students involved in the 3 studios that were done. We've actually had 3 public exhibitions. One was in the School of Design and one was in Hamilton Hill and one was in Albany. And we've had at least 350 people come through to look at the exhibition. We've got 54 surveys completed from people who looked at the exhibitions, and this project has been one of the ones that I've socialised probably more than any other, which is pretty good considering we've only been going for just over a year. We've presented it 8 times externally, several times internally, and we've also run 4 workshops externally using some of the methods that we've used outside of the project. Okay, so a little bit about the workshops. They were free, very important, and they were open to local residents. We asked them very simply to just create a piece of art that represents something that is important to you about the coast. So it was a very broad prompt that they had, which allowed them to be quite creative. We wanted to have an experience where the people involved would get something out of it, that it wasn't purely extractive. So they would learn a new skill, they would hopefully have fun, it would be something creative to do with others, an opportunity to be heard and to be seen, because we then exhibited all of their creative works in exhibitions that were held publicly. We also really wanted to make sure that nobody went hungry. So, it's research, but we've got to have some good catering and some nice coffee for people as well. We provided all the materials. They didn't have to clean up any mess, which I'm sure is a huge bonus to a lot of people who are used to cleaning up after maybe small children, for example. Okay. At the end of the workshops, we let people just enjoy what they were doing for between 2 to 3 hours, depending on the workshop that we were running. And then we had a team of people who were just quietly interviewing each of the participants about their artwork, what the coast meant to them. So we asked them a range of different questions around the place they had represented, what is special to you about this place, what would you like this place to be like into the future, and anything else they wanted to share with us. So they were short interviews, and we then used some of the words that people gave us to turn into artist statements about the work. So this is an example of one of those. This is a collage that was produced in under 3 hours. All the different papers have come. They've all got their own story, which I won't go into, but was really fun to work alongside people here. So this is Emu Point by Trisha Darling. If you're familiar with Emu Point in Albany, you'll probably immediately recognise those red groins, the red rocks that I showed you briefly at the start, and then the hills behind Binnalup in the background. So all of these narrative statements were exhibited alongside the artworks, and we found that people actually really enjoyed coming to the exhibition and reading all the stories that people had written about the places. That was an unintended really interesting part of the exhibitions that we had lots of feedback on. So Trisha, for example, has pointed out things like the way that she feels when she goes to the beach, that it's a place that she notices little things, changes, lots of different colours, and she's been going there for a long time. So there's family connections, and she talks about the fact that when she was in primary school, they planted a tree, but that tree is no longer there because the spot has been eroded away. So she's seen this in her lifetime. Another example there, I'm just pulling a few from Albany as well. So we had a lot of people who really regularly visited the beach. They came along to the workshops. They were interested in art, but primarily they really loved these places. So a lot of our participants came every day or several times a week, and they wanted to tell us about why they would do that and what they were doing there. One of the themes that we had a lot was about change. So lots of people were recognising that these places change every day, a lot, through the week, over the months, through the seasons, over the years. So this idea that these places need to be exactly the same is kind of refuted by this understanding that, in fact, there's a lot of change and we do accept that this is what happens. Okay. This is one of the wall hangings. You can see this one here if you want to come up afterwards and have a look. This was produced by all of the people from our Albany workshops. We put them together. We've got the one from Coburn at the back, and you can go and have a look at that at your leisure as well. And if you want to admire the stitching, please do that, because that was me. So, and apologies to my husband who had to listen to the sewing machine going for about 16 hours straight. These textiles were really beautiful to look at, and just have a look at some of the details. This particular one here, somebody wanted to represent a Norfolk Island pine, and they've actually gone out and found a little twig and then just stitched it into the fabric. So there's all these like little hidden details, which are very cool. Over here, I'm not sure if you can see this, but these are the artist statements that were exhibited alongside the artworks. We had some poems as well. So local author Renee Pettit-Ship, who some of you will know, she's also been involved at research at UWA, and she ran a poetry workshop down at Middleton Beach, which was a fabulous afternoon of people really getting immersed outside and coming up with some poems. So Renee gave them some prompts, and then she also edited the final poems so that, because this is only being done in like 2 hours, right? So writing a poem in 2 hours is pretty intense. So they did an amazing job, all of our participants, and then Renee really made them read beautifully, and then Daniel formatted them. So we exhibited these as well. Okay, we did some thematic analysis. So this is fairly standard practice in a lot of social sciences. We went through the transcripts. We identified some of the common recurring themes among participants. And a lot of those were things that they're not particularly surprising. We know that these are things that are important to people in other parts along the coast, which shows us that we're on the right track. We're really understanding what community members are interested in. Connection to nature, very important. These places are also important for connection to family and social networks. Important that they're accessible, that they promote well-being in the activities that people want to do, and that they respect cultural and heritage values. They have appropriate infrastructure. Spirituality became really important, particularly in Binnalup or Middleton Beach. And as I mentioned before, people acknowledge that change. This is just one example. When you do thematic analyses, you tend to look at the quotes that people have said, and then you pull out important quotes that really speak to different aspects that people are interested in. So not only were people acknowledging the terrestrial vegetation and the terrestrial landforms and fauna, but also underwater. And I think that notion of looking at the underwater life also inspired a number of the students who are working on the project. That's another one there. I'll go through these relatively quickly just so you get a sense of what we were looking at rather than the exact content. But wilderness, openness, making sure that there's that space for wonder and joy were really important to people. So I am going to hand over to Dan, who's got the most engaging, beautiful slides to show you. But what we did with all this information was we put together a information pack for the students in the Landscape Architecture Studio unit. So that was a little it's a book, I guess. It's it's a report. That would be a better way of saying it, that kind of pulled out all of these themes. So the design brief was given to the students, and Rosie is one of our fantastic landscape architects who also co-led the Rising Tides studio, and she's on parental leave at the moment, so couldn't join us today. But Rosie did a fantastic job of pulling out this immense volume of text that social scientists like to work with and distilling it down into a really succinct design brief and a design prompt for the students to work with. So I'm going to hand over to Daniel.
So yeah, when Natasha came, I think it was late 2023, and said, let's collaborate in some way. It was very exciting because we were running this studio actually at a pace, which is in North Fremantle around inundation and coastal change. And I was thinking, it'd be great to have coastal engineers to talk with here. It'd be great to have also social scientists and geographers. And this project kind of offered that opportunity for the design spaces to connect and the disciplines to connect with other disciplines, which was wonderful. This is a project that came out of that time, but it's, looking at a big scale, then looking in at the details, but then producing visions. And this is something in the School of Design and in landscape architecture that we love to do. It was fantastic to have Arnold come to talk to the students early in the semester, along with that fantastic design brief that was written based on the community values, to talk about what can go terribly wrong and how, you can just end up building hard solutions all the way down the coastline to buffer and protect against sea level rise, but then to think about landscape and also some of the really wonderful solutions that are out there in the world that the students became very inspired by. So this was the kind of birth of this Rising Tide studio that I led with Rosie in the School of Design. And we were very fortunate to have a great team of teaching associates, Kane Holdsworth, Liam Moritz, Sophie Nielsen, Kate Driver, many of these very experienced, wonderful landscape architects. a whole range of first, second, and third year landscape architecture students. I think we have Amity with us today. Thank you for coming along. The others are busy in their next year studio at the moment. And also a community of practice who come into the studios and work with the students and give crits and reviews during their key milestones through the semester. And of course, all of these wonderful supporters, including the Oceans Institute and who were responsible for so much of the communications design and the graphic design that you see. So yeah, beginning with this was wonderful, beginning with the community perspectives as visions, because I think one of the problems that this project also was identifying is that, you know, it is often planners and architects and landscape architects who might hold this sort of vision idea, possibly sometimes on a pedestal, but maybe in a divorced way from the community. So to kind of democratize the process of vision making from the beginning was really nice. We identified these 8 themes, which ran through the community words and also their artworks. And these formed the basis of kind of talking with the studio, but then also presenting the work in the Rising Tides book. And they were place, system, change, adaptation, wild, access, play, and time. I'll just quickly run through all of these. We start the semester in the Rising Tide studio on the Cockburn coast and Fremantle coast with site visits, taking the students out to site about this time last year. So it was raining and it was very blustery, but we nevertheless had a wonderful time on site. Noongar elder Sandra Harvin, who Natasha mentioned, speaking with the students, and something she will say is Dubakan Kuli, which is translated to walk slowly, walk softly. So the students are sort of taking on this idea of connecting with country through Sandra's words and taking out these principles of how to work with the land and how to work with the coast. The most wonderful then analysis comes out of the student work based on these community themes and based on the words of Arnold and Natasha, who came into the studios and spoke in lectures, to understand what's going on, all the layers, all the complexities of these coastal sites. This was the particular site of Point Catherine, some work here by Sophie, first year student, and then analysing different locations, different possible design moves that might occur, and Amity's work here. And again, talking to the students on site and also sketching through the site, understanding the textures and the plants and the species and the ways that the site has changed over time. The sites that we looked at were all really important hotspots within the coastal hotspot or the coastal cell of Fremantle to Cockburn. And as many of you will know, these are identified hotspots. There's a lot of change projected in these places. And how that looks going forward is really an unknown in many respects. So the students started with these complexities in a way, and moving through analysis and the kind of design process, understanding the systems of the site, understanding the way the site's changed over time and will continue to change, started to develop their design ideas. And all the way along, these community perspectives were really, really important guiding students' work. Mandy's work here, this place called Special Memories. So change, and we were, I'd say, lucky to see the esplanade in an inundated state for a few hours as the water slowly drained out through the stormwater system. I've tried to represent that floodline. It's a real concern for me. Alison's work around Cockburn, this is a community perspective through that collage. And the students' analysis then looking at how this starts to change. And moving now into sort of the design phase as the students start to have ideas in the landscape architecture studios. And this is Amity's work, looking at a whole series of boardwalks around the Woodman Point site, how these could be developed to enable and encourage access, how these could be developed to also provide resilience against the coastal change, while, allowing the things that the community love to remain flourishing in this place. Amity's drawings here and sections through the landscape. Listening, watching and observing nature will generally give us the answers. A first year project around Point Catherine, imagining how these sort of tidal infrastructures might start to buffer against the resilience and buffer against sea level rise in this location, imagining actually that large groin is now disappeared. So the sort of multi-billion-dollar projects, potentially. This one at Esplanade by Lewis Crump, looking at how the whole coastal area gets reformed around an eco-link in a nature park. interesting project, and one certainly that got the those of the City of Fremantle design teams thinking. All the interactions of different species in this place. To work that prioritises non-human species and more than human conditions. So this one is for the ferry turn, looking at the Woodman Point site and imagining it in the future scenario. Again, developing places for access, bird hides, also coastal structures that buffer against that sea level rise. This was Gail, and I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Gail during one of the community sessions, and she'd been diving on the Ammo jetty for 45 years.
Yeah.
So she had these amazing stories that just went back through so much time. And the changes she'd witnessed is quite phenomenal, like huge changes. Really interesting. So students looking then at the underwater worlds, at oyster textures and mussel reefs and other ways of connecting in with this. You know, the human structures can do a lot for the non-human. Access was a really common theme, so there was no shortage of student projects looking at boardwalks, places to gather, places to connect with the coast. Some first-year drawings here, all by hand, very delicate work. And then to play with another theme, tidal pools. Rhiannon wondered why we don't have any in Perth, but there are so many in Sydney. Perhaps it's a bit blustery. But still, she imagined one here along the coast, the Tidal Haven project. And Ryan Thomas, a project called the Shoreline Sanctuary, where these eco-structures used to create artificial reefs, sort of start out as play structures in the landscape, but then as the dunes migrate and coast changes, they become buffers against the coastal change. Work here by Ryan at the Esplanade. And finally, that kind of theme of time. I saw it in all weathers, all moods, all winds, Mary Foster. And looking over time, that we could start a plan at one point in time that could evolve as time progresses. That you could maybe start things tomorrow. And Connor imagines here a low-fire landscape where you start to gradually change the asphalt into a parkland at the coast. Sophie's project for the future there on the coast. So there was a lot going on, and we published it all and brought it all together with the wonderful help of both Kate Driver and Sophie Nielsen, who were teaching associates and research assistants in this project, in this Rising Tides book, which I'll share a QR code because we've put these up online now as well. And that's Sophie Nielsen and Kate Driver here at the exhibition in Coburn. I think the wonderful thing here is that we're showing many visions, and then the community start talking about many visions. It's not just a reaction, like you mentioned in the sort of Northern Beach, the Joondalup example. It's not just a reaction to one vision. It's a conversation about a whole series of different futures. And the students wanted to go north from Esplanade and start thinking about the future of Fremantle, but we had to, keep them in their sight. But I think this was a really interesting example that's obviously happening right now, and it's happening as we speak around how possibly up to 50,000 dwellings move into that port area in Fremantle. And the change of this place over time from a sort of limestone headland into a port, and possibly the change back in the role of looking at other places. I think this is the Toronto waterfront. Very different biophysical context, but very similar context in many respects. And the transformation that a landscape architecture project like this one, the Lower Don Lands, has been able to make in that location, connected to a whole, framework and system scale for the city of Toronto. And it's all happening as we speak. It's like, we can do these things. And the importance of then community and conversations and engagement is really inspiring. So the vision here was really great. And it was for students, it's educating and connecting with a whole new generation of landscape architects. But then it's for the community. It's knowing the options and shaping the visions. So unlike the kind of community engagement, which happened very similarly in Coburn and very similarly in Albany, for the Albany project, we had much less time. We had a number of months and then only 3 days down there with the students and less than a week for the drawings. So the Rising Tides Bin Art project was much more fast-paced. But at the same time, it was very, very meaningful because of these connections with UWA Albany, and particularly acknowledging Arnie Lynette Knapp, her children, Dion and Chandel Cummings, and Professor Stephen Hopper, who's, as many of you know, just a wonderful and very generous person at the UWA Albany Centre. And we took down 7 students on these Rising Tide student bursaries. So again, Amity is one of those who's here. And it was myself and Liam and Sophie involved in putting together this project with the students. So here we are, only a matter of weeks ago, looking out over Vinala and Middleton Bay, Emu Point out there in the distance. And magical weather, when Kinjarling, the place of rain, can be raining on you for days and days. This is us being blinded by the sun. So Lynette here was sharing a story that Vinala means the place where you're kissed by the morning sun. And that's exactly as we were here with Steve and the whole group in the sun. It was a bit of a homecoming for me because, I mean, Albany was the place I was born and grew up. So it was really nice to connect with Albany through a professional capacity, I would say. And the vision we created, Sophie, Liam and myself, is looking at this whole existing linkage of wetlands that run through, if you know Albany, Lake Seppings, all the way up through a channel called Poorup, which is today kind of a drain, but a really important wetland channel, up to the connection with Oyster Harbour. So this is an existing low-lying area of the coast, which is going to experience significant change. And Arnie Lynette's memory of the water that flowed in this location was particularly important to kind of connect all of this up. And is it 2070? Is it 2100? Who knows? But it created a real conversation with the community around how these places change. And with the students, we gave each student one of 7 sites around this whole network to imagine in a future scenario. So here are the students on site in Albany. They look like they're in a cool band in this photo. Walking through the lower lying areas closer to Oyster Harbour, and then investigating part of a trails terminus, how the water might be expressed through here, how a park lane could be expanded. Is that a golf course? Who knows? It might be a new future dune restoration with a smaller golf course, the surf lookout and the new surf reef that's been created on this location, and the site that Natasha mentioned here, the really critical Emu Point area. So UWA Albany hosting us for our studios, and then all of the community work feeding in, particularly the poetry for Albany, which was wonderful to have. And students were very inspired by that. And the Student 7 visions. And it's vision out here for a whole series of little coastal structures and islands around Emu Point to use a nature-based solution to stop that. Not just building another groin all the way down, but thinking of this as a much more nature-led response. To the surf lookouts along the edge here, a project by Ryan. Trail terminus by Mark, and expression of water in the urban area by Megan. To an expanded Lake Seppings project by Avril, and one by Ruth here, looking at a whole series of boardwalks and flyovers in the Lake Seppings area. To a connection with the edge of Oyster Harbour. And we put this together as a fold out, so you can come and grab one of these if you like one. A record of all the beautiful work and that weekend in Albany. So here the students are then at the Gap on the final day. I think the opportunity to exhibit, and this is what I'll just talk about briefly, the opportunity to take this and exhibit it both in Coburn and in Albany was really fantastic. And you just get such a warmth and such a wonderful reception from the community when you take their own visions back to them, but also other visions from student work that's inspired by their visions. This is the exhibition at the UWA Summer Exhibition last year. So we displayed all the work there. But then also Anisandra welcoming at the Coburn exhibition earlier this year. And all the work on the walls and people examining and thinking, and all the wonderful photographic work and also the artworks for the Coburn and Fremantle coasts. To Albany just a few weeks ago, this is the kind of interesting things that happen in your hometown where your mum ends up speaking to the SPVC and over a wine. But here we all are. It was just blustery cold wind. But everyone came to the Albany exhibition. The weather didn't put anyone off in a way. So we're all here talking about the project And it was fantastic to see the community responding to the work and the community so proud of their own ideas and designs and artworks as well. And talking about this vision, talking about the future and wondering what it all might mean. So this is a QR to the Rising Tides publications. So these are physical publications, but they're also available digitally now if you want to save this. But we can maybe share it. We'll share it with you too via a link.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's...
I won't do that. Okay, so thank you. I think looking at all of the student visions and understanding how they all fit together was so amazing, and just seeing the quality of the work that came through was really incredible. Like, I was just blown away. Amity is here and you're representing all of the students, but it was such an incredible piece of work. So I got all my colleagues in geography to go over to the School of Design. I'm like, look, you've got to have a look at this. This is amazing. And to have it all put together in a book was really just fantastic. So just in the last few minutes here, we want to leave some time for questions. But what we were really interested in as part of this project was understanding, well, how useful, how relevant, how important is the approach that we've taken? And we really wanted to get feedback from people about the approach we were using. So we had these feedback surveys. So we gave a flyer to everyone who had picked up a copy of the book or who picked up a fold-out, depending on which exhibition they were at. We also put them on the walls at the exhibitions, and they were answered by members of the community, so participants in the research who came along, and also general members of the community who happened to come to the exhibition. We also had, we've also got the results divided by whether the person is a practitioner in a relevant field, or perhaps they might be a researcher in a relevant field as well. We were interested to know how much exposure they might have had to these like visioning techniques that Dan has just explored with us, how useful they thought different aspects of the approach would be, some of the opportunities and barriers for implementing a similar approach in their local government, and whether seeing these design visions actually change people's perceptions of what might be possible in the coast of the future. That was really important to us because, as we mentioned before, some of these conversations about coastal change are so difficult and people are so focused on what might be lost that it's hard to think about what you might possibly gain or what could change and retain those values. We also did ask whether any specific visions reflected their goals for the coastline, but I'm not going to talk about that because actually a lot of people said, I can't choose one, there's too many and they're all really good. So, but we do have that information. So one of the key questions we asked was, prior to attending this exhibition, were you aware of the use of future visions in adaptation planning? About half of the practitioners who came through said that they were aware of it, and a smaller proportion of community members. So we presented this work with the Walgo CharMap Forum, the Coastal Hazard Reduction Mitigation Action Plan, I think I got it right again, forum in December last year, and they were some of our practitioners. And we also had practitioners coming along to the Hamilton Hill exhibition and to Coburn, and we've got about 17 practitioners responding and 37 community members actually answering the question. So there's amongst the community in particular, a relatively low level of awareness that visioning is possible. For only our practitioners, we asked them how useful they thought these elements might be in delivering information that could support coastal adaptation planning. At the current time, there is a lot of information delivered to the community about hazard and risk and possible, changes to the coastline, but there isn't a lot of information delivered around different types of visions, and the community engagement is typically fairly straightforward. It might be come along to a town hall, answer this online survey, and that's pretty much a short engagement there. So we asked them again, apologies for the text. The first one says creative methods of community engagement. So how useful practitioners thought that might be. Some people thought it might, sorry, this is terrible. Green means very useful. Dark green is very useful. Light green is useful. So the majority of people responding thought that both creative methods of engaging with the community were useful to very useful. Creating landscape visions that express the possible futures for those areas was useful to very useful, and overall very useful. Like, a lot of people really thought that the sort of visions that Dan has just presented would be really very useful to present to the community to talk about alternative approaches. And then the final question there is whether discussing design visions with the community as a form of engagement would be useful to very useful. And again, all of the respondents said that it was either useful or very useful. So I think this does showcase that this approach has got some utility. We've certainly had contact from local councillors at both City of Albany and City of Coburn, City of Coburn and City of Albany, who were really interested in learning more about this process. Sorry about the text wonkiness there. Okay, a few quotes from practitioners. So we solicited the feedback at the Walga Forum and at the 2 exhibitions. Overall, there was interest in potentially applying this approach, but recognition that it would need some resourcing behind it. There was a recognition that it does reflect community perspectives, that it's inclusive and provides opportunities for connection, and that it could potentially facilitate better trust, which is a really important component of any community engagement program. I've highlighted a few quotes there, but just to kind of, I think the first one, creates a non-confrontational environment, is really important. Greater level of connection with the community. And I think this idea that adaptive investigations or adaptation investigations are currently very technical, but the landscape planning and integration is a missing piece in this. Emphasising as well that when we're talking about landscape architecture, they're not engineered solutions. These are concepts that would then go through another stage if you wanted to choose one of those to move forward with. And also some ideas around the fact that community members can really relate to the arts, that it might be a language that people are more comfortable with than science, and this can be a really good way of engaging. Some community perspectives as well. Of the ones that responded, 70% of them said that yes, it had changed the way that they view what they'd like to see at the coast. So seeing these visions gave them some other ideas about what might be possible, and in general it was a very hopeful perspective, like, oh, I can see aspects of this that really reflect what I'd like to see. It's an educational and creative form of engagement. It provides a sense of hope, possibility and connection. At the exhibition, a lot of people were reading other people's stories and saying, oh, I didn't realise that everybody was walking up and down that beach for the same reasons that I'm walking up and down that beach. So it gave people this sense that actually there's so many rich stories. I'm not the only one that thinks this way. Like, there's a sense of connection imparted from being part of that exhibition. And I think I want to leave some time for questions, so I'll just leave some of the quotes there. But really, again, highlighting the spotlight on community values. The final one, which you can't read, all of the work that was mobile, so not the textiles because we're keeping those, we got everyone to sign their life away so we could keep them. We returned people's art to them in a frame, and so this person was saying to involve the artist is blah, 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 is genius. Okay, fine. But to frame the art and then return it to the creator further enhances the process, as the pieces will continue to generate conversation amongst everyone else who looks at them. Some reflections so far. So some of the pros, I think I've talked a little bit about that. The public exhibitions in particular were a really important opportunity for connection and engagement. Some of the cons. So we did have relatively small sample sizes for our workshops, and maybe that's not representative of broader views. This is kind of a pilot study to see if the approach would work. There may be some communication barriers, so people may not be as used to reading and interpreting visual information and may want some more information about that. And we did have a few people say, I really wish the exhibitions were open for longer. We were only able to open them for a short time for this project, but we had a number of people saying, I wish it was open for longer, and we will be making digital copies of everything available as well. The next steps include just disseminating a how-to guidebook for managers and practitioners, finalising all of the analysis and write-up, and then we would, love to talk about potentially piloting for a real planning context if there are any stakeholders who might want to pursue that. And then, obviously, as Dan was saying, these things are happening. I mean, Toronto, that's a big, future goal, but these things are on the horizon, so maybe trying to implement it would be really amazing. And, okay, so I was joking to Dan before that I need like a sort of Star Wars style, thing with all the names going forward to try and acknowledge everyone who was part of this. But there were a lot of people who contributed to this project, which I think was just a tribute to the fantastic team that were involved. Like, everybody just really wanted to be part of it. Everyone who we asked to assist said, yes, we will definitely help. So it was really fantastic. So, and I've probably even left some people off this, and I apologise if I have left anybody off. But we're really grateful from the support from the Oceans Institute, from the School of Design, from the School of Ag and Environment, School of Earth and Oceans, City of Albany, City of Coburn, City of Fremantle, obviously, and as well. And we've just had so many project partners all of the students. This work was not possible without all of the students and all of the community members as well. So we're really grateful to everyone who was involved. And yes, I think I've emailed almost every single person on that list. So thank you to everybody. And that's it. So we do, if you need to go, we've got some time for questions. And if you want to receive any of the outputs, that's a Google form that you can sign up to and just say, yes, I would like to hear more about this project. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Natasha.